The year was 1982, and arguably the first ever RTS video game was made. It was called Utopia, and oh how the genre has come a long way. With the upcoming years, games such as Herzog's Way and Dune 2 would be released. Nothing really groundbreaking for the masses though. That was until the mid-90s, when games like Command & Conquer, Warcraft 2, and of course Age of Empires, where the genre started gaining attention, eventually hitting its absolute peak for around 10 years with games such as StarCraft, Age of Empires 2, Red Alert, Generals, Lord of the Rings, and of course, the most famous RTS games out there in current times, the Total War Warhammer series. Of course, there are plenty of more RTS games out there, but the thing is, no one really cared. You see, the genre is, well, dying. And so with it, its player base. Those who dare to open an RTS game and spend hundreds of hours strategizing, commanding and improving their tactics are but mere legends hiding in plain sight with humans, limited to communicating with their fellow counterparts via Game Ranger and similar websites, in order to battle it out and make use of what now is a long-lost talent. Welcome to the Rosetta Stone channel. In this video we will take a look at the rise and fall of RTS games, how it came to prominence, and the reasons that are contributing to its downfall. I did this entire video myself, so please hit the like, subscribe, and picture this, if you will. The year was 1995. The publisher was a little old company called Blizzard. You've probably heard their name somewhere, whether you're a gamer or even a lawyer. I wonder why. But back in the day, Saul Goodman was still a slippin' Jimmy, and Blizzard was still very ambitious, as they were well known in designing fantasy games with rich lore. They also prioritized multiplayer games, something that was rising in popularity in the mid-90s, whether it's through LAN connection or online. The game they released was Warcraft, Orcs and Humans. The sales were high, reviewers were impressed. The game would go on to win awards as well, inspired by one of the first multiplayer RTS games, which was Dune 2. Warcraft, Orcs and Humans included new types of missions such as conquering rebels related to the player's race, limited forces missions, and of course skirmishes. And with the success of the video games comes money, and with money comes sequels. Another one. And so its sequel would be released within a year, Warcraft 2, Tides of Darkness, which was a commercial hit. Another mystical fantasy game with great atmosphere and storytelling. This game would go on to rival the Command & Conquer games, its main competitor. Healthy competition if you ask me. It would go on to sell over 3 million units. Now that is a huge player base. Blizzard were living large. Everything they released was a financial success. And as mentioned, more money means more games. And one of their next projects would take the RTS community to a whole new level. You see, a couple of years after Warcraft Tides of Darkness, they released a rather different RTS game. This time it would be futuristic, and it is one of the lasting games to this day. The game was called StarCraft, a military science fiction franchise of games set in the future. The game was so successful it expanded and grown to have 8 novelizations, a board game, and licensed merchandise. StarCraft took the RTS genre to new heights. Imagine, this game was the best-selling PC game of the year. An RTS game. Did you know that RTS games require significant attention to detail, making wise calculated choices in a short period of time, and a high level of multitasking, all while trying to be cool, calm, collected and clutch? People were smart back in the day. Now, everybody has ADHD, allegedly. Anyway, the game sold 9.5 million units, 4.5 million in South Korea alone, and I'm sure they're geniuses over there. We spoke about the rise of multiplayer games, and this game would cause Blizzard's online multiplayer service, Battle.net, to rise by 800%. The game was competitive, and was blessed with longevity, later becoming one of the most successful games in the pro gaming scene. But the question is, are the RTS games made by Blizzard the best out there? The year was 1995. Again, Blizzard were releasing their Warcraft RTS franchise, and so another publisher was like, hold on now, I can make RTS games too, but better. and that developer studio was Westwood Studios, and their RTS game was none other than Command & Conquer: Tiberian Dawn. Their approach was different. You see, while Warcraft was more fantasy-oriented, Command & Conquer was more real-life war-oriented. Do you have a full-grown beer while still in the 5th grade? Are you into real-world politics? Do you have your own ideas on how to start and end real-life wars? Well, this is the franchise for you. Command & Conquer was a critical success and has been considered to be one of the greatest games ever made, selling millions of copies. Another game from the franchise was Red Alert, which was a big success on PC, earning over $16 million from domestic sales alone, and the reviews were high. People loved it. For most, it was the best strategy war game at the time, and all this success would gain the attention of the Lord Voldemort of gaming companies, though they were decent at that time in my opinion. But that company was Electronic Arts. Eventually they would acquire Westwood with its sister company, Burst Studios, for a whopping $122.5 million. In other words, this office right here, you see that? Yes, this cost $122.5 million. Though at the time, EA wouldn't interfere with Westwood as they continued making the next games, Red Alert 2 and Generals. Red Alert would feature memorable video cutscenes and feature a great cast. The game would also be considered as one of the best games of all time, and sold a buttload of copies as well. It was the best multiplayer game from the year 2000, and we all know that amazing soundtrack. Might as well give them a Grammy. And then finally the game that my friend would continuously crash every time he played it, because it was that good. The game that turned little boys to men. Command & Conquer Generals. It was released in 2003 when the RTS genre was at its absolute peak. This game was a multiplayer powerhouse. I remember at the time every internet cafe was 20% Counter-Strike players, 78% general players, and of course 2% would be the two little youths. One is playing Pink Panther and the other is at the GTA Vice City strip club. Now, I have a confession. I am not an RTS player, but my friend is, and that's where I know a lot about the genre. When Generals came out, all he wanted was for the rest of the posse to compete against him. But personally, I was more of a turn-based roguelike gamer. Other posse members were into shooter games, and one certain posse member only plays the first level of every game before getting bored and quitting. The RTS posse member was pro-level good at the game. There was just no balance. This was us when we played against him. All I can remember from the game is Mandem screaming, "No Aurora! Aurora is prohibited. If you play Air Force and I see an Aurora, I am going to..." With people enjoying these games and the companies making millions of dollars off the success, EA would take advantage of the success and fanbase of the Lord of the Rings franchise, which was basically the talk of the town in the early 2000s. And in 2004, Lord of the Rings Battle of Middle-earth was released, with a story close to the movies and using clips from the movies as well, and whether you were into RTS games or not. Once you hear that there is a Lord of the Rings game, you are intrigued. And so because of this, it was obviously another commercial success. Another one. And was awarded the best strategy game in the 2004 E3 Game Critics Awards. But the more famous game would be its sequel. Another one. Battle of Middle-earth 2, released in 2006. Gaining much praise for its integration of the Lord of the Rings universe and eventually was 4th best-selling game of the year. These games allowed fans of the Lord of the Rings universe to be immersed in it in a way other games could only wish it could do. The game would have a cult following in the years to come, but more on that later. The year was 1995. Just kidding. Now, of course, there were big RTS games that were extremely successful in the early and mid-2000s, such as the Age of Empires franchise, which I apologize for not doing it justice and speaking about it. But to make it short, this game was a smart one to make. Usually RTS players are into war tactics, which we usually learn from when learning about history, and this game focused on history. From the Middle Ages to the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs and the Roman Empire, Greek, Egyptian, and Norse mythology. Anything you might have learned in a history class is probably in this game franchise. And I am a sucker for history. But again, RTS games are just too much for me. I am but a simple human with limited capabilities. Anyway, there are too many successful games in that time period to discuss. But I'm going to talk about one of the only remaining well-known successful RTS games in recent times. And yes, I'm talking about the Total War Warhammer series. People pay thousands of dollars to get collectibles related to the Warhammer universe in general. There are hundreds of books about lore and the different factions. And of course, board games. You think Marvel has a massive universe? You think DC has a rich, expansive lore like no other? Do you think the stories of Days of Our Lives are more intriguing than the Total War games? Well, perhaps. Okay, scratch that. You can add these two universes together and they still won't match the variety and massive universe of Warhammer. This, along with a cult-like hardcore following and investment, an RTS game involving the many different factions, lore and storylines would lead to nothing but success. One of the earlier Warhammer RTS games was Dawn of War back in 2004. The game was a natural hit because, as mentioned, RTS games were at their peak at the time. All you had to do was release one that functioned. But in recent times, specifically 2016, when the first Total War Warhammer game was released, the competition had faded away. The game excels with its massive world and graphics, also adding turn-based elements with the real-time tactics elements it already has. It was a game that the old-school RTS players would enjoy as it carried on to be true to the genre in a world of gaming that would of course be filled with corruption. The game sold 500,000 copies in the first few days alone, also having high reviews in the process. Its developer, Creative Assembly, would implement Steam features such as the Workshop to support mods, further enhancing the gaming experience. Warhammer 2 would be released a year later in 2017. It's basically the same as the first game but added a new campaign and factions. The series would utilize releasing several DLCs that had more campaigns and factions along the way, also gaining favorable reviews. But here is the difference between 2017 and 2004. Warhammer 2 would be named among the top 50 games of the year, while RTS games in the early 2000s would fill up the top 10 list. Yes, it was named the best strategy game of the year, but let's be honest, there was no competition. Warhammer 3 was released in 2022, which was also the same as the previous games in the franchise, but had a new map and of course new factions. The game would also utilize DLCs to add to the experience, except this time, they were criticized for charging high prices for the DLCs, which is always a problem. Creative Assembly would announce that the DLCs did not meet up to the expectations. And how would they, when at this moment of time, the genre is dying? But why is it dying? We talked about the success, the build-up, and the rise of this genre. But let me ask you this. If you have friends, or posse, mandem if you will, how many of them is a hardcore RTS player? The answer is either 1 or 0. They are a dying breed and must be protected at all costs. You see, there are many reasons for this, and I will give you what I believe are the main reasons for this. First reason is that people are dumb as fuck. Yes, I said it. You're probably a dumbass. Playing RTS games requires high mechanical skills. The learning curve is very steep. This means that if you're going to play these games, you have to be fully invested. Now back in the day, these were the games that had the best graphics, so it attracted a lot of people. The games they would produce were fresh concepts, or related to universes that people were into, such as the Warcrafts and the Lord of the Rings franchises. These were really good reasons to be invested. The second reason is multiplayer and online gaming. This was a new concept, and it was a revolution in the world of gaming. Do you mean I can play against a random player from Estonia while sitting in my grandmother's basement? Say no more. It was exciting. I remember the first time I played against a stranger on the internet. I felt like a vigilante hacker. I was only playing pool. The third reason is obvious. This genre, well, kinda lacks innovation. When the famous games in the genre were released, they kinda went all out, which is a good thing. But the bad thing is that gamers always want to see something new, refreshing. Take for example when Fortnite and PUBG were released. People went nuts, ADHD diagnosis was at an all-time high.
You shut up when I'm talking to you! You shut your mouth!
Allegedly. But 100 Battle Royale games later, the genre kind of died. Because basically all the ideas were used. The same thing with RTS games. This with association of the rise of other genres such as the more easy-to-learn MOBA games caused this genre of gaming to decline. You see, MOBA and MMO games are also multiplayer games, but are much easier to understand and play while also keeping things competitive and interesting. Also, the competitive scene for MOBAs and MMOs are more exciting to watch. And if you wanted to be a pro player, the prize pool for MOBA games are insanely high compared to those of RTS games. That is, if you find an RTS competition these days. The prize pool for League of Legends is around $6 million. Dota 2 was $30 million. Whereas StarCraft, the final prize money was $700,000. Finally, the most profound reason this genre is dying is because of the developers. Yes, I said it. The developers and their greed. They had a good thing going, but they just had to be the man with their pride. Shout out to Mike Ehrmantraut. But yes, let's take for example Blizzard. Should I really get into it? Why not? A work environment with sexual harassment and discrimination, allegedly, causing bad lawsuits. They stopped supporting fan-favorite games such as Heroes of the Storm. Warcraft 3 was plagued with technical issues which disappointed their hardcore fans. Mobile games with pay-to-win mechanics, which was not an April Fool's joke. They banned a pro player because he supported Hong Kong. Allegedly. I don't know why I said allegedly, but you know what? Allegedly. I know these are more recent, but you get where it's coming from. This, along with the fact that the original staff left the company, causing it to have a declining reputation year after year. They also shifted their priority and focus to MMO games, because they can profit from in-game items and customizations, where they couldn't with RTS games, allegedly. On the other hand, when it comes to the Command & Conquer franchise, they were acquired by EA. And if there is a company that can challenge Blizzard when it comes to having a bad reputation, it's EA, which might as well stand for Electronic, allegedly. You see, one of the later Command & Conquer games did not meet expectations, which caused EA to announce that they would close Westwood, just like that, which included significant layoffs, and those who would remain were given the option to transfer to LA or EA's headquarters, or call it quits. Westwood would eventually be closed in 2003, one of the RTS developer powerhouses gone forever. EA didn't stop there. Apparently, the working conditions in the development of the Lord of the Rings games were terrible, with extreme crunch time environment taking place, allegedly. And a high-profile lawsuit by the programmers was settled by EA for $14.9 million in 2006. That, plus the fact that their online game servers would shut down in 2010. This was partly due because of the expiration of the licensing deal with New Line Cinema, who hold the license for Lord of the Rings. Imagine you're a hardcore Lord of the Rings fan, and you're waiting for the weekend to battle it out with your friend from Moldova. And now you can't. This is how my friend felt like. I remember the days he would come to school and talk about how he owned everyone in generals, always bragging about how he made the game crash because he was that good, how he mastered Battle of Middle-earth, and how random middle-aged men would request a game against him in the internet cafe. I remember he had 3 of us posse members go against him in a game of generals, and he beat us all. That evil smile would fade in years to come, because he couldn't find people to play with. It was difficult. Yes, he played and enjoyed the Warhammer games, but nothing beats Red Alert 2, Generals, and Lord of the Rings. Now he is limited to using Game Ranger and wait for hours for someone to join a room, hoping it would be a worthy competitor. Precious time that he doesn't always have. The player base is getting less and less every day, every month, every year. But there are still more concurrent players than the Suicide Squad game, to be fair. That's actually sad. But it is unfortunately a true reality. I decided to make this video because of him. Not because it is important to him, but perhaps someone out there, someone with an influence, can hopefully see this video and do something about it. Because, well, we are stuck with him playing pro clubs. And well, this is him playing. I'm sure I lost 10 years of my life watching him waste 1v1s with the keeper. So someone please bring back RTS games and put me and the rest of the posse out of our misery. How can you be so good at the hardest genre of gaming, but you can't shoot the ball on target? Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Please leave a like to support the channel and subscribe for more creative videos like this in the future.